Fire Emblem, anime. There was a time if you brought up these two topics, they would only seem to be slightly associated, but after Awakening and Fates, Fire Emblem and the anime art style almost seem inseparable. So what exactly happened that caused this shift in tone? How long ago did Fire Emblem have ties to the anime industry? And what caused the change in artistic direction that led to Awakening and Fates? In this video series, I hope to answer those questions. Before we can discuss the modern day, we have to learn about the past. In this episode, I'm going to detail the evolution of the series art and the relationship between Fire Emblem and the anime and manga industries, from the series beginning in 1990 until the anime adaptation in 1997, a piece of media that has been near forgotten. Let's start right at the beginning, the first Fire Emblem game for NES. Now I doubt many of you have even played this game since it was released 25 years ago in Japan only. But this game is the foundation the series is built upon, including its art. Now the art for this game was done by Daisuke Iizuka, and I swear to God, I did my homework and I could not find this guy credited anywhere else. But just looking at the cover art and the in-game portraits, you can see the framework of Fire Emblem character designs taking shape, albeit primitively due to the budget and technology of the times. The portraits drawn here set the standard for what they should look like in the future. For example, take Hardin's portrait and compare it to the modern versions from Shadow Dragon and New Mystery of the Emblem. Other than the updated resolution, not much changes, and it fits the modern style that you could call Fire Emblem style. It looks right at home among other pre-Awakening portraits. So while we may lose Marth's amazing manskirt and the derpy facial expressions, Fire Emblem keeps the standard set by the first game for quite a while. The same could be said of Fire Emblem's sequel, Fire Emblem Gaiden, but things begin to change around its release in 1992. Fire Emblem Gaiden brings on 3 new artists, Naotaka Onishi, Satoshi Machida, and Toshitaka Muramatsu, but the game ends up having the least artwork of any Fire Emblem. Most of the art appears in the game manual, and upon looking at the art within the game, very little changed from the first. Regardless, after the release of Gaiden due to solid sales of both Gaiden and the original game, Fire Emblem manga began to appear, starting with the manga adaptation of the first game. This adaptation is 5 volumes and ran from 1992 to 1997. I looked desperately online for some scans, but I only managed to find the covers. Still, it's proof that a manga adaptation could work, even with the limited high-quality art available from the source games. The manga adaptation of Gaiden was not so lucky, only receiving 1 volume with 4 chapters, never really panning out properly. Has some pretty funny looking scans actually. Yet, after only 2 games, Fire Emblem was already finding itself with manga adaptations, and this proves its style meshed with a more typical perception of anime. Now, manga obviously is not anime, but is a step toward that market area. Often anime are adaptations of a manga, and both mediums cater towards similar markets and demographics. Now at this point, these manga were just side promotional content, with the aim of selling more copies of Fire Emblem. They weren't part of the fabric of what made Fire Emblem what it is artistically, but that changed slightly with the release of Fire Emblem, Mystery of the Emblem in 1994. Fire Emblem, Mystery of the Emblem is the 3rd entry of the series, and unlike its predecessors on the Famicom, Mystery had the power benefits of the Super Famicom. This meant leaps and bounds for the artwork. Even on the opening screen, you can see the difference instantly. This is important, because the artwork now had a much more prominent role in enhancing the story and therefore the experience. The art takes on a much more important place in the grand scheme of things. Nintendo obviously saw an opportunity, so they started another manga adaptation of the original game. This adaptation was released just after Mystery of the Emblem and ran until 1999. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to have a look at it on Serene's Forest. It's an interesting read. There's a full fan-made English translation and the art is pretty damn cool. Mystery of the Emblem itself went on to become a commercial success as well. It was the best-selling game in the series until the games actually came overseas to the West. Now Fire Emblem had become a more powerful brand, and combined with its artistic similarities to animation of the time, it seemed like an anime adaptation was imminent. And it was.
It is a time before time. Once 7 nations shared the Acanian continent with the kingdom of Saint Acania at their center. Now, however, the gods of war and madness have descended upon this land, and the country of Derhua, led by Medius, the Dragon of Darkness, has colluded with Garnef, ruler and supreme priest of the Khadin, to destroy the central kingdom. Their victory was swift and terrible. Having reduced the once mighty capital of Acania to rubble and ash, the Derhuan forces swept forward like a wave of steel. Now even the kingdom of Arisha, inheritors of the strength and the will of Henri the Great, has fallen at the feet of the army of night. A golden age of peace has been swallowed by the demons of darkness, and now Medius, Garnef, and Death rule half the world.
So, the Fire Emblem Anime was a 2-episode OVA produced and released by Studio Fantasia and KSS in 1996. To introduce these guys, Studio Fantasia was involved in the production of My Neighbor Totoro, and they mainly work on other OVA projects. Other being the key word there, and KSS has been involved with shows such as Naruto and Golden Boy. Not much information on the show's production exists, so it's hard to tell how this partnership with Nintendo came about. Now, the anime itself was released in 1996, then licensed by ADV Films, releasing in the US in 1997. This made the Fire Emblem Anime the first exposure the US got to the series, 4 years before Super Smash Bros. Melee. Now, so far this video has been mainly historical, but for the Fire Emblem Anime, I'm going to need to be more subjective, as I try to deconstruct where it succeeded and where it failed, because I believe a lot can be learned about how to approach adapting Fire Emblem into animated form from this attempt. I'll leave a link in the description where you can watch it for yourself if you desire to do so before hearing my ramblings. I'll end on a high note, and instead begin with the issues I had with the adaptation. First being the tone of the battles. Now, Fire Emblem as a series can be quite comical during the support conversations, and even before and during chapters. However, when a chapter commences, stuff is usually serious business, save a couple, maybe oddball chapters. The main issue is that the anime's light-hearted comic relief is during the battles rather than outside them. This is very apparent in the first episode with instances of butt jokes and goofy action, when just before we were watching townsfolk get slaughtered, there's a disconnect that makes the battle feel awkward. I really feel they should have used this first episode to establish some basic tactics that work or relate to the actual game. For example, a common tactic is to soften up a unit's HP with an archer before finishing off the enemy close quarters. In fact, rarely do units ever defeat an enemy on their own until later chapters. Of course, one-on-one encounters are much more conventional and effective in animation. I think the duel between Oguma and Navarre in episode 2 was a pretty good example of this. But then the fight between Marth and the pirate leader in episode 1 really didn't do a lot. It felt really cliche. You got the hostage to stop the hero from attacking, the last second save as he's about to be defeated. It doesn't feel like Fire Emblem. Now, outside the battle sequences, I don't have as many problems. The show does a really good job at fleshing out some characters in the short span of 2 episodes. Shida gets a nice backstory on why the people of Talis accepted Marth, and Marth also gets interesting development on what it means to be strong, and we get a view of how his father abused him as a child. It's pretty good stuff. The soundtrack is also very solid, providing instrumental versions of what used to be 32-bit music at that time. The animation is very nice as well, but when I was watching the show, something just didn't feel right. Sure, it had the music, the sights, the sounds of a Fire Emblem game, but it didn't feel like Fire Emblem. Now, I know that translating the feeling of playing a video game to an animated show is near impossible, but that's not the problem I had. The issue is that beyond its coat of paint, the show doesn't capture what makes Fire Emblem Fire Emblem. The adrenaline rush of waiting to see if your 50% hit chance will strike, perfectly executing a strategy you came up with yourself, and even the shock of losing a unit to an enemy critical hit. The show doesn't even get close to replicating those emotions at all. Maybe I'm just too picky when it comes to Fire Emblem. I know there are some people online who really enjoyed these 2 episodes that were made, but for me to enjoy anything related to Fire Emblem, it needs to capture the spirit of it, which the show really doesn't. Now, if what I just mentioned doesn't apply to you, knock yourself out, and keep watching what you like watching. But if they ever attempt another Fire Emblem anime, I really hope they use the license to enhance the viewing experience, rather just to blend in with the pack. Fire Emblem's story is really conventional. It needs that second element of personal investment to succeed. Failing to capture that in animation results in a very typical cliche show. Anyways, I'm done my rambling. So let's wrap up this video with some goofy facts and trivia about the show, because there are some ties that are just so hilarious and they might surprise you. Alright, so this was the first time Marth had a voice, and the Japanese voice actor for Marth, Hikaru Midorikawa, went on to voice Marth permanently, including Super Smash Bros. So this show actually established Marth's voice for years to come. However, Marth's English voice actor in the dub was Spike Spencer. Spencer is pretty prolific, and you might know him as the voice of Shinji from Evangelion and Rollo from Code Geass, but what you might not know is that you've probably already heard him in a Fire Emblem game. Spike Spencer was the voice of Exilus in Fire Emblem Awakening. Pretty cool, since these characters are on complete opposites of the spectrum. But that's not the only tie Fire Emblem has to Evangelion. The voice for Shida, Kim Sevier, also voiced Yui Akari. The voice for Jagan, John Swasey voices Gendo Ikari, and to finish it off, the English narrator Tristan McAvery has also voiced Gendo Ikari in other Evangelion media. Off that Evangelion note. So far, I've been referring to Marth as, well, Marth, but the localizers at ADV Films decided to localize it as Mars. So although you might not have known it, Mars was Marth's official English name for multiple years, until the release of Super Smash Bros. Melee, where it was changed by Nintendo to Marth. So there you go. But we're not even halfway done. In the next episode, we're going to delve into the remaining games up to the release of Fire Emblem Awakening, where we'll touch on the introduction of animated cutscenes, the evolution of the character designs, and more miscellaneous manga that you didn't know existed, plus some more ties to the anime industry. I'll see you then.